morning and happy Tuesday 10 at 10. I am your host, Richard Charpentier from Baking Innovation. And every week on Tuesday, we take 10 minutes to answer as many questions as we can. All right, let's get started. So, the first question we received was someone asking for calcium propionate for a steamed sweet corn tamales. I have used a very small amount and vacuum sealed and use it to ship with a shelf life of 5 to 7 days to ship everywhere in the US. And what basically the amount is calcium propionate. So calcium propionate might not be the best. You could use potassium as well. There's calcium propionate, there's sodium propionate. Maybe sodium propionate might work best because you'd have no yeast in your corn dough for your tamales. But the most important thing as you use a propionate, they're most active at pH lower below 5.5. So where's your pH? If you don't have the right pH in your tamales, you will need to use an acid to lower it to make the propionic acid effective in your tamales. And usually the recommended level is between 0.1% all the way to 0.4%. All right, I hope that answers your question. Remember, your pH has to be lower than 5.5. If you have more questions, please go to Dr. Lynn's page on Bakerpedia. You'll find she has listed, there's a lot of information on mold and mold preservation, etc. So I would recommend you go there to try it. So next question, what preservative can I add for steam bun to prolong its shelf life? I use baking powder and yeast. So similar to the previous question, uh, once you steam a product, the product will contain a lot of water. So unlike a product that is baked where you're evaporating the moisture, once you steam, you're bringing in moisture back into your product. And often products that are steamed, instead of having a moisture loss, get a moisture gain, so you're getting more moisture within your product. And now you want to see what preservation system. So for me, the first thing that comes into my mind was like, okay, what to use the first in order to know what preservation, where's your pH, the pH of your product, and also what is your water activity, because it's going to be through the roof, it's going to be super high. And controlling that, it's going to mean, okay, how acidic, meaning how many acids do I have to put in there in order to, for any mold preservation, calcium propionate will work well, and will, because you're using yeast. So I will use a calcium propionate and use it, because don't go too high, because then the flavor will impact. But that's the only thing I'm thinking of, that you will have to use a calcium propionate and see where your pH falls. Because if you have a pH, if you have yeast, I'm assuming you'll be in about 5.6, 5.8 with a baking powder. Without knowing the fermentation and the formulation, that's what I'm guessing at this point. But calcium propionate will work for you. Next question, characteristic of a good sponge cake. So a sponge cake is the cake you serve when you have a birthday cake, or it's also referred to a genoise. But if we get to the classic American sponge cake, what do you want with your sponge cake? What in sponge cake, what you want good increase in volumes, meaning once you put in the pan, you want it to be flat to the top. You want good resiliency, meaning if you press on your sponge cake, as the name, like a sponge, it will bounce back, it will come back, it's not going to just collapse. You want the crumb, internal crumb structure of your cake to be fine. So that means once you cut it, or if you put a cream filling in the center, it's going to stick. And lastly, you want it to be moist and taste delicious, because those to me are the criteria. So I'll go back again. So a good rising volume, a good resiliency, a good structure, good flavor, and a good color. So to me, once you get that, and it's a key, once you establish what represents a good cake for you, it's about creating consistency. And once you lock that, what I call the gold standard for your cake, then you can come back and establish a quality control for that product, or a gold standard for that product. But good question. All right, next question. How much glycerin should I use to create a soft baked cookie for a shelf life of 2 to 3 months? What is the baker percent rather than the entire batch percent? All right, so we sort of two questions here. One, I know bakers and batch. So total formula represents the entire batch. Everything in water, eggs, sugar, chocolate chips, whatever you put into your cookie is a total formula. As baker percent, everything is represented based on the flour that you're using. So in this case, I've always worked with baker's percent for breads, and I always work with total formula percent for anything that contains more ingredients than the yeast than the bread. So typically, if you're using glycerin on true percent, and I will come back to it, on true percent, I do not like to exceed 4%. So on baker's percent, I don't know, because I don't know your formula. I don't know how much sugar. I don't know how much eggs. I don't know how much. So it's very difficult for me to say, oh, I know how much flour you're using. There's no ballpark that says, hey, this is how much you use, because remember, unlike a bread, when you use a cookie, you have so many other ingredients taking place into your cookie. So therefore, whatever percent is going to be determined based on, especially in bakery, and that's why we don't use bakers for things that where you get lots of stacked up ingredients. But if you want to do soft cookies, there's a lot of liquid sugar that might be much better than glycerin, because glycerin, as you go above the limitation, or there's no true, it's a grass ingredient. As you go above, you'll get sort of a burn sensation, because glycerin might not taste like anything, but if you exceed and you go put too much, it'll create that burn tingling sensation in your tongue, and it's not pleasant. So as mentioned, if you're trying to create a soft cookies, there's plenty of other ingredients you can use. There is raisin paste, there's date syrup, there's so many other things you can try to lower your shelf life. So hopefully I answered your question, but I'm sorry, I cannot tell you exactly baker's percent on your formulation, because I don't know what else is in there. So I could say 2%, but 2% out of what? So good question. Now, last question, gluten-free and shelf life extension. We struggle to get a fresh product for more than 2 days. What do you do to extend the shelf life of gluten-free breads? And again, go on Bakerpedia. There's lots of talks, lots of information weekly on gluten-free and gluten-free breads and what to do. So fortunately for you, there are plenty of great ingredients that you can be using to extend the shelf life today, because we have great hydrocolloid, we have great fibers, we have great starches to use, but it's about learning how to use them together to create a formulation that's going to give you more than 2 days, because 2 days, quite frankly, is not enough for any manufacturers. You know, by the time you can distribute, you can't do anything. You just have to keep it to a retail level. So it's something for something like that on such a short time. I recommend, you know, you either get a consultation package for 1 hour, and we could discuss your formulation, your goal, and I can guide you to get to where you are. But today, again, as I said, there's plenty of great ingredients. That's what product development comes in place. That's why you have product developer doing all the work and testing and validating of what works best for your application. But anyway, my friends, so thank you very much. It was great. Again, a great Tuesday. So you go have a fantastic rest of your Tuesday. And thank you for listening to Tuesday 10 at 10.